the history of the world in 1 year, a lot gets left out and misrepresented even. And I believe there's a few misrepresentations in your text, but we're going to go over it. The Old Kingdom is the first one, and what they tell you about is the Egyptian rulers were called pharaohs. They didn't use the term pharaoh in the Old Kingdom, but it says that here. And they took pride in preserving justice and order, and they did have a vizier. Do you remember that from one of the Disney cartoons? Who was the vizier? What cartoon had that? Do you remember? It was Aladdin, and the king's vizier, he was the evil guy in the story. The vizier, V-I-Z-I-E-R, the vizier is the chief minister of the king. Your textbook chooses to mention one famous person from the Old Kingdom, and that's Ptahhotep. And he was a vizier at one point that took an interest in training the youth, and he wrote a book on manners, really, or it's called Instructions for people that are in training. And this is a quote from his instructions that's in your book. It says, "If you are sitting at the table of one greater than you, take what he may give when it is set before you. Let your face be cast down until he addresses you, and you should speak only when he addresses you." Okay, does that remind you of an old saying parents used to have here in the States? Do you remember what it is? Pardon? Children should be... You guys haven't heard this? You're lucky. I grew up hearing it. All right, you know it. Children should be seen and not heard. Doesn't that sound familiar? All right, so there we go. Ptahhotep wrote instructions to help young men know their manners. And of course, the thing that's most famous about the Old Kingdom is the building of the pyramids. This was millions of limestone blocks. Each of them weighed about 2.5 tons. There are different theories on how they did this. One time a student did a bulletin board for us on the 3 main theories of how those blocks were put in place, and it was very interesting. Most people agree that they rolled the blocks on logs and probably used some kind of pulley system, or used, the other theory is they had ramps around the outside or something. It's confusing, but for people without the technology and equipment we have today to move blocks that are 2.5 tons. So I'm going to give this class a 2.5 ton block, and I want you to put it on top of the gym. Okay? Figure it out. Even all of you together can't lift it. So, but I want you to put it on top of the gym. How do you think you do it?
Make a lever of some sort, like a pulley.
A pulley system that can lift 2.5 tons. So one rope probably wouldn't do that, right? How about using a crane? Could a crane do that? Does it reach up high enough? I don't know. But they didn't have a crane. A ramp, pushing it up a ramp. Now, lots of people were killed building the pyramids. There are evidences for that, but a lot of people lost their lives. It was a hard job. Can you imagine if you were pushing a 2.5 ton brick up a ramp and it started to go back down again and you were trying to stop it? If you won, it would get to the top. If you lost, what would happen to you?
You turn into Jell-O.
Yeah, it'd probably be bad. It'd probably be bad. And depending on how high you were, you could jump, but still, that is an amazing and marvelous feat. So when did they build the pyramids? During which kingdom? The Old Kingdom. Okay, come on, wake up. Which kingdom? Old Kingdom. All right, good. The next kingdom is called the Middle Kingdom, and this is the part that I don't like. They have 2 paragraphs or 3 on the Middle Kingdom, and it says, there were power struggles, crop failures, turbulence, and that this was just, they identify this period as a turbulent period. And yet in history, historians call the Middle Kingdom the classical period of Egypt, the one where the best art was produced and the most interesting art. Let me tell you about art in the Old Kingdom. This isn't in your text, but art in the Old Kingdom was very interesting. They started to do art that really showed their culture and their ideas, but then they started making rules for art. For example, well, these are 2 men, but if you had a husband and wife carved like this to put on their tomb, they had to be sitting, they had to have their hands on their knees, The male had to be red, the female skinned, and the female had to be white skinned. There were all these conventions that they set up, and they had a strict code for art. And that lasted for 3,000 years. But when the Middle Kingdom came, art became more realistic. For once, pharaohs had wrinkles or looks of concern on their face. Things were much more believable in the Middle Kingdom. So the Middle Kingdom, the dates you're going to be learning here, the Middle Kingdom starts about 2350, that's just averaging it. People disagree on it, but one of the interesting things about the Middle Kingdom is it did start with a period of turbulence. The collapse of the Old Kingdom was followed by decades of famine and strife, and they had problems. But once they got settled in, they did some great things. They learned how to drain land. They did a large drainage project during that time. They had, let's see, there's some other accomplishments here that they talk about. They did something that was a mistake. There were foreign invaders that came in called the Hyksos, Hyksos. And they settled in Lower Egypt in the Delta region, and they brought chariots, which really amazed the Egyptians. But anyway, it wasn't completely a horrible time. The Middle Kingdom, like I said, was the classical age with the greatest point in the culture of Egypt. The designations Middle Kingdom and intermediate period and things that they call, they're constructs of 19th century historians. The Egyptians didn't call their culture the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, right? So this part where it was so turbulent right after the Old Kingdom fell, a lot of people call that an intermediary period, but you don't need to learn that. Your book makes it quite simplistic. The other thing I wanted you to know about the difficulty of this is we can basically, if we make it real simplistic, we can say, we can identify the Old Kingdom because that's when they built what?
Pyramids.
That's when they built the pyramids, so that's easy to identify. And then we can say that the New Kingdom was the Empire period, and you'll be learning about that. And everybody argues about where the Middle Kingdom starts and ends. But in the classical period, the things that they advanced, and I'm going to have you repeat this in a minute, their language and writing, their literature became beautiful. Their language was perfected to a refinement that made some beautiful literature. Their art was elegant and realistic, and they also had a great military. So language, art, and military were areas that really shone during the Middle Kingdom. But they had so much at that time, after the tumultuous beginning, that they had a fear of loss, and it's evident in their literature that they wrote. When you have a lot, you have more fear of losing what you have. The more you have, the more nervous you become about protecting it. You put alarms on your cars and houses, and you think, oh, like these people that had this hurricane coming in the Caribbean, they had to think, what's the most important thing to me that I want to save? What would be the most important thing to you that you would save if you knew your house was going to be flooded? Someone share with me what you would grab first. You're going to let it all stay there and sink, I guess. What?
The pets.
The pets, okay, I agree with that. Then what?
Photographs.
Photographs. A lot of people go for their photographs. Now we have it nice because a lot of you have stored your photographs in the cloud. But people that have printed photographs with no other copy of it, they go for that. What's something else you might want to save?
My tablet.
Okay, electronic things, your computer, your tablet.
My drawing tablet.
Oh, your drawing tablet. Oh, that's neat.
Old things that got like remembrance.
Sentimental things. Well, when my 3 kids were still living at home, they evacuated us one time because of a fire. It was right on the hill next to us. We could watch it burning, and they made us get out. And so the kids were grown, so we had 5 people in the house and 5 cars, so we could take a lot of things. But it was like a personality test to see which each person took. My daughter was in college and the 2 boys were at home. So my oldest son, his biggest concern was his computer. That's what he wanted to get. Once that was in his car, he was happy. My middle son, Jared, who's always been the real affectionate family person, and he just loves being with his parents and his siblings and his aunts and uncles, and he grabbed the quilts his grandmother made him, some, just sentimental stuff. Almost all of it was sentimental stuff, and I thought, wow, that's Jared, all right. And then my daughter called long distance from college because she heard we were evacuating, and she said, can you just go in my room and get my journals? She's kept journals from 3rd grade till now. So those were real precious to her, all her journals that she'd written.
Oh, I hope you got them.
I did, and we didn't have the fire reach our house, which was nice too. But, and then people said, when I tell this story, I'd say, what do you think I took? And they all said, your clothes. And I said, no. I took pictures. I said I had a really expensive coat. It was like a $7,000 coat or something that I grabbed. And then I just took some accessories like jewelry and scarves, because those are really hard to replace compared to clothes. And those are the things that really, make outfits. So I did some of that. And my husband was into the photographs and the technology with my older son. So it was interesting. But these people, they would have a flood every year when the Nile flooded. So we'll talk about that a little more later. But they had a fear of loss. Like I said, that was evident. And they each had their treasures. And the more treasures you have, the more stuff you want to pack on that car when you're evacuated. And you have this panic. There's something about living simply that's quite freeing. But now they weren't living simply. They were having more possessions. And so that was detected in the writing of the Middle Kingdom. One writer wrote that he after this is over, he said how he missed the security of how Egypt had been, and so they were really afraid of loss. Okay, and then the last period is what do you think?
New Kingdom.
Okay, the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom is also referred to as the Empire period. And it is the period in ancient history from, Ramses II. How many of you have ever heard of Ramses II? Ramses II ruled during this time. The Ramses started during the New Kingdom, and there were a bunch of them, Ramses I, II, III, and so they often call this the Ramesside period. But you are going to read about 2 people in your book. One is a female ruler who is named Hatshepsut. And she was a woman that became pharaoh. She kind of grabbed the power, and one of the things she'd do is wear a fake little beard, like the pharaohs would wear little beards here, and she would wear one of those. And most of the art of her is depicted as if she's more male than female. Ramses II is really popular. There's all kinds of theories about how he figured into Bible history and what period he lived during. But this was the time in Egypt when they reached their greatest geographically, or land-wise, the biggest they ever were during the New Kingdom, because the Ramses conquered surrounding areas. They sought to create a buffer between themselves and the Levant for protection, and they wanted to be bigger. They fought the Hittites. Do you remember this story? Have any of you heard this story that historians said when I was a child that the Hittites didn't exist? There was no such people as the Hittites, and they were mentioned in the Bible. And they kept saying, no, they don't exist. It's made up. The Assyrians they had evidence of, and the Hyksos. But Hittites, they said, no. Well, since then, they've discovered, archaeology has discovered that there was a race of people called Hittites, and it fits what the Bible says. So that was kind of an interesting discovery in my childhood. It was a big argument between people who believed that the Bible was truth and scientists who rejected that idea, arguing over this Hittite thing. But indeed, we know now, and it's in the textbook, that there were Hittites. And they were in what we call Syria today, and Egypt conquered them as well. So first of all, I want to ask you, what are the 3 kingdoms of Egypt? I want to hear you say it. What are they?
Old Kingdom.
Okay, Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. What is one of the keys of the Old Kingdom? What are their greatest accomplishments? Yes, the pyramids is correct. And can you tell me what period came after the Middle Kingdom? The New Kingdom. And what was one of the outstanding characteristics of the New Kingdom?
Empires.
Empire. They got really big and they were considered an empire. Between that one and the Old Kingdom was the Middle Kingdom, and I was going to ask you for the 3 outstanding achievements of that kingdom. I told you I'd be asking you for them again later. What, during the flowering, the peak of Egyptian culture, the Middle Kingdom, what were 3 areas of great achievement?
Their art,
Language,
their art,
their art,
literature.
yes, language and literature, that was great, and their art became an elegant form of realism, and what else? Nope, they built a great military. Okay, read this section on the Old, Middle, and New Kingdom, and I think you're going to also be reading about Sumer. Thank you.